Happy Halloween and welcome to another Doctor Who review.
But not just any Doctor Who review.
No, today we're doing something a little bit different. Today we're reviewing a Doctor Who book.
But not just any Doctor Who book.
Indeed, it is one of the Puffin Classic crossover range of books.
Not just any of Puffin Classic.
Right, we get the point. Anyway, Dracula with an exclamation mark is written by Paul Mars, featuring the season 1 TARDIS team of the First Doctor, Susan, Ian, and Barbara.
TARDIS lands them on the cliff tops of Whitby just before Halloween 1901. But while they're looking for a holiday, they instead find trouble as the seaside town is beset by murders, and the victims have the telltale signs of two puncture marks on their necks.
Could the local theatre production of Dracula have anything to do with it? And where on earth has Ian got to?
So, Ben, have you ever been to Whitby?
I have never been to Whitby. Have you been to Whitby?
I have, funnily enough, actually.
Okay.
A couple of years back now, I went on a holiday up to Yorkshire. And while up there, we had a little day out in Whitby. My main memories of it are that there were lots of steps, lots of people. This was around bank
Do you know
holiday.
how many steps you probably walked around?
199?
That's the one. That's the one.
That's the number. Yeah, that number is also important in the book as well. They mention it several times. But yeah, lots of steps, lots of people, and my nan having a turn so bad it put her off fish and chips for about a year are the main highlights of that day for me, or lowlights, as it were. Uh, but no, it's a nice little seaside town. I wouldn't mind going back there maybe a bit more off season, maybe towards Halloween time or something. Maybe bring a little book with me.
Halloween party.
Indeed. Yeah, go stay at a Halloween hotel or something.
Hmm.
But no, instead of reading this on that kind of, wet English holiday, I ended up bringing this with me to Kos, an island off of Greece, and sat by a pool, reading it in the sun, which is probably not quite best suited to,
Doesn't have the same
a sunny
atmosphere, I would
holiday.
say.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm escaping from a sunny holiday to go to a wet English one in the form of this book. But you know what? It didn't dampen my spirits. I actually really enjoyed it. It was a nice little thing to keep me going while I caught some rays. So, yeah, how about you? What was your experience like reading this
Uh,
book? How did you set the scene? Or,
well,
as the
you
case
you were catching rays, I was catching drizzle. So I had the
may be.
proper experience of reading this book. Yeah, I
As
made
nature intended.
as nature intended. Yeah, I saved this book for sort of around sort of 7 o'clock. So it's like the nights are dark now. You know, just lit up the front room with lamps and cup of tea with the book and just get transported to the cold bite of the Whitby sea air, really.
I think that's one of the things this book does very well is setting that scene. Paul Mars has a wonderful way of writing that very British kind of weather and atmosphere, really, doesn't he?
I think with what Paul Mars does with Whitby in this book, he really paints the canvas of Whitby that it's these little warrens of streets and you can get lost within them so easily with like the sea mist rolling in and you can get discombobulated within, and that becomes quite a big thing within the book, really, with all these murders going on. And I think there's something really lovely about this book being set towards sort of the late end of the Victorian era
Hmm.
and that sort of air of change are happening.
Yeah, I mean, having been there personally, it does feel like it paints that scene very well. I think it's helped me to imagine some of the setting, but at the same time, what I'm reading doesn't conflict with my memory of the place. It feels like a either, researched through books and photos or well researched in person. Paul Mars may just have a very intimate knowledge with this location himself. Whatever the case, it definitely shows in the book. And it's using a lot of the hallmarks of Whitby, I would say the 109 steps, the old monastery on top of the cliff, the church there as well. You can just imagine TARDIS where that would nestle in.
Yeah, you can imagine the battered sort of prop of the TARDIS being there, really.
Mm,
Like a bit like what you see in sort of the war machines, how bad the TARDIS is and that. Yeah, can really
yeah.
picture that.
I think as well, like the Time Meddler, that sort of ambience that you have
Yeah,
by the cliffs, that sound of the sea rolling in, I think that all very much, you know, works nicely with this story. It's a story that does feel right for this era, even though it's a pseudo-historical where there are actual vampires here. And, there is mention of them being ancient enemies of.
the dark times.
Yeah.
And that's one thing what I found quite interesting about this book is what it does with Susan and her memories. Like the Doctor could have wiped her memory of certain aspects of Time Lord society to protect her.
Yeah, because the
Which,
word Time Lord is never dropped in this.
no, no, no,
It's
no.
always very much my people, which again feels
Very right for the
the future.
time.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of that, I feel like the characters are done very well here. They all feel accurately written. There's lots of good First Doctor dialogue in there, from his more
Yeah.
whimsical stuff to some of his more perhaps over the top moments where he's calling out the vampires.
Yeah, I think the first Doctor, or I should say the old Pixie, is realized really well, like you say, because I think what Paul Mars does with the first Doctor here is he's sort of played for laughs in certain aspects, with like the idea of Dracula being a book and all that sort of stuff, and like he plays it for comedy a bit, like what you see in Twice Upon a Time in a way, but it's
Mm.
not derogative of the character because then you'll get moments where he is confronting these people called Cornelius Time and Muriel Flynn, where you get the Hartnell outburst of warning about vampires and what they're doing is wrong and they're summoning them here. So it really captures that. And then you get the wonderful moments between him and Van Helsing, where there's this wonderful sort of one-upmanship where you can
They're
sort of
both these
see,
older gentlemen, aren't they?
yeah, a bit like Jago Lightfoot, how I sort of imagine that sort of dynamic. And there's this wonderful bit where you see how far the First Doctor has sort of come because it's still very early on in their travels, and
Mm.
how the Doctor sort of a little bit, I wouldn't say embarrassed by Van Helsing, but he doesn't want to be outdone by Van Helsing. So, like, right, I'll show you the TARDIS. And the Doctor's like, hang on, there would be a time where I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it's those nice little bits you get in novels where they can give that introspection to the character
Mhm.
without it being too on the nose, like on audio or TV, if they were blurting this stuff out. But instead, with a book, it allows you to look into those depths of these characters, what they're thinking and feeling in a natural way.
Yeah, and I think the other standout for this in terms of character is Barbara. I think this is very much Barbara's story.
Mm.
She's sort of spearheading sort of the plot with Ian because Ian goes missing. I'm sure we'll talk about Ian in a minute. But Barbara's very much sort of proactive, trying to get Ian out of this vampire hypnotic state. She's doing all the sort of research there, and she, encounters Christoph, who has a bigger role to play within the book. And I think the way Barbara's realised is how she sort of sets down because there's that excitement that they think they're back in the 1960s. The Doctor's finally brought them home, but Barbara, looking at the architecture of the Abbey, and realised this is pre World War One because of how the roof is or whatever. So it's really nice that she has that deductive skill of history, going, look, this isn't quite our time. We're so close, but yet so far.
Yeah, and then there are those nice moments between her and Ian where they're indulging in the familiar, enjoying some fish and chips,
Yeah.
but also recognizing that, things are different here, 60 years out from their time. Which, I mean, it's funny thinking about how long ago this time feels to us, 1901. It's the same amount of time. It's 60 years between there and when Ian and Barbara are from, as it is for us to when Ian and Barbara are from.
Hmm.
It's like there's 60 years either way, and that's just one of those weird ways that we perceive time and perhaps how much changed from the turn of the 19th century going through the 20th. I mean, another character that I think is very much worthy of note here, and perhaps I would argue more than Barbara,
Okay.
is Susan. funny enough. I think she gets some great moments here. While the Doctor is paired off with the older Van Helsing, she gets to team up with the younger Van Helsing. And there's a nice, more teamwork there between the two, as they're almost trying to one up their paternal or grandpaternal figures here. And, you know, sort of let the younger generation take over a bit and are spearheading their own investigations. There's perhaps a bit of romance there as well, but it's not overdone. It's the way it would have been on TV, I think, quite neatly. Um, yeah, I do really enjoy that pairing. I think Susan gets to be a very strong, proactive character within this story, while also still staying true to who she was on TV. You get more of that mysterious character that we first got to know in An Unearthly Child and then perhaps got a bit lost later on. It's nice to have that back here. And it does work where we are exploring, the remnants of the dark times, really. We're diving back into Time Lord mythology without calling it Time Lord mythology. It's probably one of the few times that, that stuff can happen to Susan, because on TV that just wasn't there. She might as well have been human after a couple of stories, really.
Yeah, and I think just the dynamic that develops between her and Bernard, the little fancy dress moment of Susan
Mm.
with a mustache, which creates sort of a nice image. But you have that sort of care and concern for, her grandfather, the sort of final sequences where you think the Doctor's got rid of the TARDIS key and
Mm.
just the sheer protective nature she has and how she could jeopardize the Doctor's plan. It's very true to Susan that she would blunder into this thing thinking about her grandfather, not thinking about the wider circumstances that's happening around her.
I also think, Ian, while he is perhaps shortchanged in this story where he spends a good deal of it missing, I don't feel like that's to the story or Ian's detriment. Like, you have these stories on TV where these actors are on holiday, so the characters get written out for a couple of episodes or have just pre-filmed inserts put in. And this sort of gives that vibe. So again, it works in the story's favor of being quite true to the era. Uh, and while Ian is there, he's certainly making his impact. But at the same, he's a character who, on TV especially, often got focused on more so than others. So I don't mind for this story that he's the one who gets the least to do, because it allows things to balance out a bit more.
Yeah, he's normally the action hero getting all these sequences, but this time we have Barbara, staking vampires and all that sort of stuff. So it's nice to sort of see that shift over to, the other TARDIS members, really.
Yeah, and I mean, even the Doctor's getting involved in some of the action here as well, which is quite neat to read, really.
Yeah, again, sort of that one-upmanship with Van Helsing, but he's more nimble. He's more of a mountain goat than Van Helsing himself. And yeah,
Mm.
I think, like we say, the atmosphere for this book is incredibly strong. I think the whole Victoriana setting, sort of using Dracula as sort of this Jack the Ripper figure in sort of Whitby's past, and there's this sort of
Yeah.
superstition for Whitby about the return of Dracula, but everyone's sort of haunted by the last sort of in 1890s and now back in 1901 Visa coming back, and because of this stage play called The Legend of Dracula with Cornelius Time, who you can instantly see what Paul Mars going for with there. You can imagine that he was going for a Christopher Lee type character, with him
Yeah.
singing, and Christopher Lee was in a rock album and stuff like that. So like you can tell that he was going for a Christopher Lee type character with Cornelius Time.
And you get those nice little flourishes as well to the dialogue in those scenes where it's like, and twice on Saturdays when they're talking about putting the show
Yeah.
every night, And speaking of that, it's written in a way that makes it just so effortless to read as well. Like it's just over 200 pages. It's not the, thickest book you've ever read. And the chapters are very short as
It's
well.
like 6 pages between each chapter, so that makes it feel very bingeable in a way.
digestible, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's the word.
Yeah. It's usually like where a scene will shift. So as soon as you're done in one setting, that's when a chapter will end. You're never overstaying. You're welcome. And it always invites you to just, oh, let's just do one chapter more. Or,
Mm.
you can quickly pick it up, read a chapter in no time, and then go back to something else. It makes for such a light and easy read, I found.
I think because you've been away from reading and this
Mm,
sort of being your introduction back to the books, I think that this is a perfect way of getting excited about, the Doctor Who book range. Because I think this range as a whole is a great way of sort of having the canvas of your classic literature, but
mm,
putting a Doctor Who spin on it. And I think that this is one of the best examples of the range, really.
yeah. And it definitely has a family style vibe to it, even though it does have these darker moments littered in there. It never feels like it's pushing that boundary to be too adult, I think. It's got that balance just right, where it's got the scares, but also
Yeah.
it feels like it could have been perhaps done at the time, and you could have sat down and watched this as a family, really. It's like those slightly older children's books that you'd have. You could easily imagine this on the shelf in, a primary school around year six, or, going into year seven. It's that sort of age range, I think, is where this really appeals to. While also having that broader appeal to Doctor Who fans of any age.
Yeah.
We are ultimately watching Doctor Who, which is a family show anyway, no matter what our age. So it makes sense that a book would appeal to that same demographic.
Yeah, you could say it's got a bit of a bite to it in a way.
Mm,
With
indeed.
Yeah, with some of the scenes are great, like the Halloween Ball massacre, and like I feel like that scene kind of teeters on the edge of like
Yeah.
that could go either way because you've got the way
It's that sort of stuff that would excite you reading it as a kid, though, because you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be reading this. But at the same,
yeah.
it's nothing that's going to traumatize you too much as well. It's not going to suck the enjoyment out of it for you.
Speaking of suck the enjoyment out of um, the ending.
Yeah, I feel like it is a bit sudden, this one. It's a great journey as you're solving this mystery, which is kind of fairly obvious, but you let that go. You just have fun with it nevertheless, because you're enjoying the world and these characters as they're bouncing from one side of Whitby to the other, crossing paths, doing their own little investigations. But then it all comes to this confrontation on the cliff tops that doesn't quite land the way it should for me.
Quite literally.
Mm.
Yeah, it's such a weird ending with what it goes for. It's hard to talk about because I don't really want to spoil it.
Mm. It just feels like the story was perhaps, meant to be a bit longer, but then suddenly had to be cut short at the last minute because there was a deadline or something there, or you know, it it needed a bit longer on it. It feels like, because instead you're going at this certain pace route, and then suddenly it's everything all at once, and then it's over. You get a nice little epilogue afterwards. I think it left a good taste in my mouth in the end, but yeah, certainly reading that ending, you could tell where it was going. You know what was going to happen, and it simultaneously felt dragged out, the ending itself, and also like we rushed all of a sudden to get there from what was a pretty solid pace up until that point.
Yeah, because I think it's trying to prove the redemption of a certain character
Hmm.
and sort of prove
But that
Barbara right.
character doesn't have enough build up beforehand.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock twist, isn't it? Going by below, I'm such and such, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll
That feels
accept
like
what we're
such a
going.
Barbara position to be in, though. I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's written very well for Barbara, but what
Yeah,
happens in the finale.
yeah. But other than that, I think that it's a real solid, nice atmosphere, like you say, family vibe strong, and I think as soon as you start reading it, you get immersed in the world of Whitby. The atmosphere it's created. I think is a real fun, easy read.
Yeah, it's definitely one I'd recommend, even if you've been away from Doctor Who novels or novels in general for a while, like I had, I think it's uh, a nice, easy way to dive back into it because it is very user friendly in the way that it's written is a pretty good way to describe it. You can easily put it up and put it down again and then come back to it. It doesn't feel like it requires too much of the reader. It's just a light holiday read, really.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like it's suited a holiday read. But that's not to say that there isn't any substance there either. There's definitely stuff for you to find along the way.
I think because the character work is so strong, and I think that's normally a sign of a good book. I think if the characterization's off and you're battling, going, oh, that doesn't seem right, that character wouldn't say that,
Mm,
that makes it less of an enjoyable experience. But because the way Paul Mars has crafted and written these characters, you want to see where they go on this journey. You want to see them get their fish and chips. You want to see them get their hot cocoa, and see this play.
yeah, it has those cozy vibes at the start, which really can carry throughout, I feel, even when the horror's happening, because you can tell that this is very much these characters as they were on TV. They're not like a 90s style aged up version of them for a more edgy audience. It
Yeah.
is those characters as they were, very well preserved in this story that feels a nice blend of, Dracula, that style of literature, alongside what Doctor Who was doing in the 60s. It all blends together wonderfully to create just a really strong story.
And I think that pretty much covers Dracula with an exclamation mark by Paul Mars.
Yeah, it's been fun doing the book, hasn't it? So
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace.
yeah, I think it probably won't be the last one we do. I mean, maybe
No.
have more of these Puffin Classic range stories, and yeah, see what else we can put your way if you want any further recommendations. That I know, Ben, you've read a few more of these than me, and you've
Yeah,
sung many of their praises to me. So
maybe
yeah,
that'd be a way to go down. I mean, we've just had some Big Finish books,
and we have
and
indeed.
Big Finish is our kind of thing.
Is our bread and butter.
So maybe we can take a look at those.
Yeah, so always another option, especially with Christmas on the way, because Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without a certain,
Plum pudding.
indeed.
Thank you everyone for watching Dracula! Exclamation mark. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for plenty more Doctor related content in the near future, and we shall see you next time. Bye
And
bye.
let's know your thoughts on Dracula if you've read it. Hmm. Take care,
Boo.
everyone.
Boo. Right. Time for
Okay,
Coco.
good plan.